everyone, welcome back to second part of this class, that is Plato's objection of poetry. What about the third point of Plato's ideal state, that is censorship, control. Censorship means control of poetry. How? In book second and a third, the Republic, to the Republic, Plato explains his vision of just society. True, justice society, where education shapes the soul. Am I right? If education gives you moral things, the society shape will be in a just way. If we put immorality, which is completely included of poems, if we allow this thing in education, means what it happens? This is what. So, in such a state, only poetry that encourages virtue, courage, discipline, and a reason should be allowed. In such state, we can see poetry. It does the work of encouraging people, shows the virtueness and courage and discipline, but they forget to introduce the reason. It should be part of this work in this poem. This is what, when we see the reason in their work, we can see the ideal state in that work. Okay, fine. So harmful or a immoral poetry should be censored or a banned. Whatever the harmful or immortal things is spreading by the poetry, it should be banned. It should be censored, rejected. Should not allow into the world called education. It should be banned. The books, the poetry books, not all books, poems should ban. Allow to hymns to gods, praise of good men and moral stories. This must only allowed in the poems. If the poetry express these are the things, let the poet write about this thing. Not allowed. The poetry should not follow tragic poetry, tales of immoral gods and violent heroes. Yes, poems that evoke pity or a fear. These are the things which make human weakness. Emotionally weakness, no way to for reason. It should not allow. Yamsha should not be in the form of poetry, according to Plato. Let's begin to the conclusion. Conclusion, only poetry that supports justice, truth has a place in the ideal society. Very nice. Only the poetry only supports to the justice. It should express the justice. What is just? What is truth? If we see these two things in a poetry, let this poetry allow to the part of this education, to part of this ideal society. If it is not, no need to be make this part of this education or a society. Let's have the fourth concept. Fourth point is that summary of the objection. Outerly summary, what we have learned till now. The first one is objection. Poetry is an imitation. Am I right? According to Plato. Twice removed from the truth. Yes, form, object, poem. Twice removed. Exactly. Appeals to emotion. Poetry, it allows to appeals to the emotion, not a reason. Exactly. Promotes immoral values. So what it turns to human being, weakens rational part of the soul and portrays gods and heroes badly. Yes. Next, corrupts the youth. Hadala, it corrupts the youth. It spoils the reality. Chasing, kind of seeking knowledge of work can be corrupted by the poetry, and influences young minds with a bad example. Definitely, if poetry teaches the lustful thing, it affects on the youth's mind. Okay, na? Somewhat lacks educational value. If poetry teaches such thing, means there is no any value in that poetry. What it happens, does not teach the truth or a reason. It won't give any lesson. It won't teaches you about the truth or a reason. What it does, shows the changing things, like not based on eternal stable truth. We can see poetry changes the things which is not eternal one. So poet lacks knowledge. If a poet doesn't have knowledge, He cannot create a poetry which is in a which express the justice or a truth. If he has lacks means he only follows the emotions, feeling, lying things, lust and all. So poet only imitates. He is not a true expert. Understood? This is what the summary objections. Till now what we have studied. That is only outer picture. What are the points it is included called the objection of poetry. You need to write these are the things in an exam. And modern response. What are the response coming from the modern critic on the objection of Plato's objection of poetry by Plato? Later things all like of course Aristotle disagreed with the Plato, like Sir Philip Sidney also did this thing, and he said poetry is useful for catharsis, purifying emotions. It is very important. See, it is catharsis, purification of soul. For example, Nodi, purification means come out from a kind of a situation. If your mind's full of fear, full of aggregation, full of emotional, full of sorrow means it makes you to relax by coming out of these things. For example, observe the movie. Again, I want to go with movies example. DDLG movie nodidra. DD Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge. What happens in that movie? Shah Rukh Khan waiting for catching Kajal. The train is moving on. ಟ್ರೈನಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತು ಕಾಜಲನ್ನು ಕರೀತಾನೆ. ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಕಮ್ ವಿತ್ ಮೀ ಲೈಕ್ ಐ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಟೇಕ್ ಕೇರ್ ಯು. What happens Kajal? She is held by her father. Patriarchal representation of patriarchal society. Father hold ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ. By seeing the Shah Rukh Khan's eyes, what happens in that situation? Readers, spectators, they holds their breath whether her father leaves her or not, whether Shah Rukh Khan will take Kajal with him or not. In that juncture, in that moment, we forget to existence of ourselves. In that moment we hold our breath in a very tension way. If you see in a first time, if you are very fond of watching the movies, we can see such kind of a feelings can occur kind of a people. Finally that father left that Kajal. Finally Kajal met with the Shah Rukh Khan. They lead their happy life. What happens that time? You feel very relaxed. That is what called catharsis. Means coming out, purified your emotions. Means for example, according to literary work ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ about Macbeth, at the end of the play, tragic play, drama, what happens? Macbeth, he commits so many things. He takes so many persons' lives. He completely turned into murderer. In the beginning of Macbeth, the reader feels very happy to see his personality. At the end of the tragedy, the spectator fears himself to see the personality of Macbeth. Fear. That is what called fear. When the end comes of Macbeth, then we show the pity on Macbeth. Once he was a milky heart kind of a person, turned into as a criminal kind of a person, or a fake or a unfaithful kind of a person, or a dangerous person. In the behaviors of Macbeth, at the end how he takes the lives of many more persons, there we see the kind of a fearness about thinking about the Macbeth. When the end comes on Macbeth, he dies. Then we show the pity towards that character. Once he was like a milky mind, now his soul completely turned into a dangerous one. That is what called catharsis, purifying your soul through the form of emotions. Means you purify your emotions. That is what called catharsis. ಒಂದು ರಿಲೀಫ್ ಆಗಿ ಒಂದು ಬಿಟ್ ಬ್ರೀತನ್ನು ಕಾಣ್ತೀರಾ, ಅದೊಂದು ಇನ್ಸಿಡೆಂಟ್ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಆದಮೇಲೆ ಅದು ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ತದ್ರಿ, ಕಿತಾರ್ಸಿಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತದೆ. ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್, ಇಫ್ ಯು ಹೋಲ್ಡ್ಸ್ ಟಿಯರ್ಸ್, ಇಫ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಲಿಸನ್ ಸಮ್ ಬ್ಯಾಡ್ ನ್ಯೂಸ್, ನೋಡ್ರಿ ಕೆಲವರಿಗೆ ಒಂದೊಂದು ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟಿವಿಟಿ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. ಕೆಲವರು ಅಳೋದ್ರ ಮೂಲಕ ತಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಫ್ರಸ್ಟ್ರೇಷನ್ ಹೊರಗೆ ಹಾಕ್ತಾರೆ, ಸಾರೋನೆಸ್ ಹೊರಗೆ ಹಾಕ್ತಾರೆ. ಕೆಲವರು ತಮ್ಮಲ್ಲೇ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಗೋದ್ರ ಮೂಲಕ ಸಾರೋನೆಸ್ ಹೊರಗೆ ಬರ್ತದೆ. ಓಕೆ ಫೈನ್, ಐ ಆಮ್ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಟೇಕಿಂಗ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್. ನೋಡ್ರಿ, ಕ್ರೈಯಿಂಗ್ ಈಸ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಎ ಕೆಥಾರ್ಸಿಸ್, purifying your emotions, that holding your sorrow in your heart. How much you hold in your heart means it affects your health. Once it is come out from the form of tears means you feel very relaxed. That is what called purification of emotions. Another name is catharsis. This does by the poem. How could you tell the poem should be banned from the society? According to Aristotle. So it can teach moral truths through the stories. Through the stories, it teaches a moral truth. It's not spreading the immorality, according to Aristotle. Imitation is a natural and educational. Yes, imitation ಅನ್ನೋದು ಅದು ನ್ಯಾಚುರಲ್ ಇದೆ, and also part of educational ಇದೆ. We cannot justify the poem is created by the imitation is not a valid for teaching in education. No, we cannot judge like this because it is a natural. Imitation ಅನ್ನೋದು ನ್ಯಾಚುರಲ್ ಇದೆ. Today I am starting this Sahitya Abhyasa Academy means I have taken inspiration from someone. Then only I have created this. This is what the words of Aristotle. And so Plato's objection were later changed, but his concern still influences discussion on art, censorship, and ethics. But whatever he put the words on a poetry, after it may be changed. Later it is changed. But his concern about the poetry still we studied as a part of the we discussion as a part of a art, censorship, and a ethics. So last part of this class, outerly summary about till now what we have studied. Plato's objection to the poetry, they appear in a book 2, book 3, and a book 10. Very important for your competitive exam. That's why I put the last option. Book 2 tells about the early criticism of poets presenting immoral gods and heroes. How the immorality is spread by taking the help of gods and heroes in the creation of poetry. We can see this thing in a book 2. What about book 3? It is discussion on the censorship, rejection, or a control of poetry in an education field. Only moral poetry allowed. Yes, education field ಅಲ್ಲಿ morality spread ಮಾಡುವಂಥ poetry ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲೋನೆಸ್ ಇದೆ. Not any spreading the immorality kind of a poetry allowed in the world into the field called education. What about books 10? Full and final attack on poetry as imitation. Completely ಒಂದು ಪರ್ಸನಲ್ ಒಪಿನಿಯನ್ ಇಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾನೆ. ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ poetry and poets? It is completely as an imitation part. Doing the imitation thing. It is very harmful to the soul and society. Not to allow this thing in the field called education or in the society in a book 10. So this is about what is Plato's objection of poetry. Hope so you have understood my class in a detailed way. I have tried to tell in a very clear manner. I think if not, in a further video I try to make it in a very clear way. And one more thing, soon I am going to make questions on MCQs on Plato and his works and his concept. Attend that one. I mean to say, watch that video also, because it will very helpful for your career, for your education field, for your competitive world. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.